The ink on the foreclosure notice had barely dried when Sarah Mitchell realized she had 3 days to lose everything her father had built, and the banker sitting across from her mahogany desk wore a smile that suggested he had been waiting for this moment since the day her father died. Thomas Sinclair adjusted his silk vest and placed another document before her, his pudgy fingers leaving marks on the pristine paper. "Now, Miss Mitchell, I understand this is difficult, but your father's debts must be satisfied. Sign here, and at least you will walk away with enough money to secure passage back east, perhaps to stay with relatives." His tone dripped with false sympathy that made Sarah's stomach turn. She looked down at the papers spread across the desk in her father's study, the room still smelling faintly of his pipe tobacco, even though he had been gone for 8 months now. The ranch had been her entire world for 23 years, every fence post and water trough holding a memory of her childhood, of her father teaching her to rope cattle and read the weather in the clouds. The land stretched across 500 acres of prime Wyoming territory grazing land, with a creek that never ran dry even in the hottest summers and enough timber in the northern section to build a small town. Her father, George Mitchell, had spent 20 years carving this ranch from raw wilderness, and now this serpent of a man wanted to take it all for a fraction of its worth. "My father's debts," Sarah said slowly, her green eyes meeting Sinclair's watery blue ones, amounted to $3,000. This land is worth at least $20,000, probably more with the new railroad spur coming through next year. Sinclair's expression hardened slightly, though he maintained his oily smile. The debts, with interest and various fees, now total $7,000, and land is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. In these uncertain times, with Indian troubles and cattle prices falling, well, I am offering you a generous settlement of $1,000. That is more than fair." "Indian troubles ended 2 years ago," Sarah countered, standing from her chair. Her calico dress rustled as she moved to the window overlooking the main yard. She could see her 3 ranch hands working near the barn, good men who had stayed on despite her inability to pay full wages these past months. They believed in her, believed she would find a way to save the ranch. "And cattle prices are expected to rise with the railroad expansion. You are trying to steal my land, Mr. Sinclair, and we both know it." The banker's facade cracked slightly, irritation flashing across his fleshy face. "Your father signed legitimate loan documents, Miss Mitchell. I am simply executing the terms he agreed to. If you refuse to sign, I will have the sheriff remove you from the premises in 3 days' time, and you will receive nothing. At least this way, you have something to start fresh." Sarah turned back to face him, her jaw set in the same stubborn line her father had been famous for throughout Sweetwater County. "Get out of my house, Mr. Sinclair. You will have my answer in 3 days, not before." The banker gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. "You are being foolish. Girl, no one in this territory has that kind of money lying around to pay your debts. I have made certain of that." The threat in his words was barely concealed now. 3 days, Miss Mitchell. After that, the sheriff will escort you off the property, and you will leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." After Sinclair's carriage disappeared down the long drive in a cloud of dust, Sarah sank into her father's chair and allowed herself exactly 2 minutes to feel the crushing weight of despair. Then she straightened her spine and began thinking. Her father had taught her that there was always a solution if you looked hard enough and were willing to work for it. She spent the rest of that day riding the property lines, memorizing every detail, as if she might never see them again. The cattle, reduced from her father's herd of 300 to barely 100 now, grazed peacefully in the south pasture. The horses, including her beloved mare Rosie, watched her pass from the corral. Everything was neat and maintained despite their financial struggles, because Sarah refused to let the ranch fall into disrepair, even as the walls closed in around her. That evening, she sat with her 3 ranch hands, Jake, Tom, and old Pete, around the bunkhouse table, and explained the situation honestly. She had already missed 2 months of their wages, and now she told them she might not be able to pay them at all. Jake, a weathered man of 40 with kind eyes and a quiet manner, spoke first. "Miss Sarah, we ain't going nowhere. Your pa gave me a job when no one else would, after I got hurt in that stampede over in Colorado. I owe him, and I owe you." Tom and Pete nodded agreement. Pete, who had worked for her father since the beginning, actually looked offended at the suggestion he might leave. "Known you since you was knee-high to a grasshopper, girl. We will figure something out. But figuring something out seemed impossible as the next day dawned clear and hot, the July sun beating down on Wyoming territory with relentless intensity. Sarah rode into the town of Elkhorn, the nearest settlement, hoping to find a lawyer or perhaps a sympathetic business person who might extend a loan. What she found instead was that Sinclair had indeed been thorough. Every door she knocked on was politely but firmly closed. The other bankers in town, both of them, suddenly had no available funds. The cattle buyers she approached all claimed they had no interest in purchasing her herd, even at prices well below market value. By afternoon, dusty and discouraged, Sarah stopped at the town's small restaurant for a meal she could barely afford. The place was nearly empty in the mid-afternoon lull, just her and a stranger sitting at a corner table, his back to the wall, in the way of men who had lived dangerous lives. She noticed him because it was impossible not to. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting down, with broad shoulders under a dusty black shirt and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was sun-bronzed and handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and eyes that seemed to take in everything, without appearing to look directly at anything. A cowboy, clearly, from his worn leather chaps and the well-used gun belt hanging on the chair beside him. But something about him suggested he was more than just another drifter looking for ranch work. Sarah ordered coffee and a sandwich she did not want, her mind still churning through impossible solutions. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the stranger rise and approach her table until he spoke. "Pardon me, miss." His voice was deep and surprisingly cultured for a cowboy, with just a hint of a southern accent softening the edges. "I could not help but overhear you talking to the banker earlier, out on the street. Sinclair, is it?" Sarah looked up, startled, into the darkest brown eyes she had ever seen. Up close, the stranger was even more striking, probably in his late 20s, with a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow and another along his jaw. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but there was intelligence in those eyes, and something else, a deep sadness or perhaps weariness that spoke of hard experiences. "Yes," she said cautiously, "though I do not see how that concerns you, Mr. Donovan, Cole Donovan." He did not offer his hand, as that would be too forward, but he did tip his hat politely. "And you are right, it is none of my business. But I have had dealings with men like Sinclair before, and I recognize a snake when I see one. If you do not mind my saying so, you look like someone in need of options." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse his interference, to maintain her pride and handle her problems alone. But pride would not save the ranch, and she was running out of time. "I am Sarah Mitchell. My father owned the Circle M Ranch, about 15 miles northeast of here. Mr. Sinclair holds notes on the property and is trying to force me to sell for far less than it is worth." Cole Donovan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "The Circle M, I know it. Passed by there 2 days ago, actually. Fine piece of land, good water, strong grass. Your father built a solid operation." "You knew my father?" Sarah asked, surprised. "No, ma'am, but I know cattle and I know land. Been ranching most of my life, down in Texas before the war, then up through Colorado and Montana. I can recognize good ranch management when I see it." He paused, seeming to make a decision. "Mind if I sit? I might have a proposition for you." Sarah gestured to the empty chair across from her, her heart beating faster with something that might have been hope. "Please." Cole sat down, his movements economical and graceful, despite his size. Up close she could see that his clothes, while dusty and travel-worn, were of good quality, his boots expensive and well-made. This was no ordinary drifting cowboy. "How much does Sinclair claim you owe?" $7,000, with his inflated interest and mysterious fees. The original loan was $3,000. Sarah found herself explaining the situation in detail, something about Cole Donovan inviting confidence. He listened without interrupting, his dark eyes focused entirely on her face in a way that was intense but not uncomfortable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "And the ranch, what would you say it is honestly worth?" 20,000 easily, maybe 25 with the railroad coming. We have 500 acres, 100 head of cattle, 20 horses, all the buildings and equipment, timber rights, and the best water in the county." Pride crept into Sarah's voice despite her troubles. Cole nodded. "That is about what I figured. Miss Mitchell, I have a proposal that you are going to find strange, but I ask that you hear me out completely before you respond." Sarah leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. "I am listening." I have money, Cole said bluntly. More than enough to pay off Sinclair and clear your father's debts. I would like to buy the Circle M myself, pay the full fair value of $20,000. $7,000 would go to clear the debts, leaving you with $13,000 in cash, enough to start over anywhere you choose or buy a smaller property outright. Sarah's hope deflated like a punctured bladder. So, you want my ranch too? You are no different than Sinclair, just offering more money. I am not finished, Cole said quietly, holding up one hand. I would buy it, yes, and then I would give it back to you. Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? I would buy the ranch, take the deed in my name, pay off all your father's debts, and then sign the property over to you, free and clear. No strings, no repayment terms, nothing. The ranch would be yours, completely and legally, with no debt against it. For a moment, Sarah could not speak. When she found her voice, it came out sharper than she intended. Why? Why would anyone do such a thing? What do you really want from me, Mr. Donovan? Cole's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been hurt. That is a fair question, and you are right to be suspicious. The truth is complicated, Miss Mitchell, and personal, but I will tell you if you want to hear it. I want to hear it, Sarah said firmly, because what you are suggesting makes no sense unless you have ulterior motives. Cole was quiet for another moment, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, weighted with old pain. 5 years ago, I owned a ranch in East Texas, not as big as yours, but it was mine. Built it from nothing over 10 years of hard work. I had a wife, Emily, and we were happy. Then the war came. He paused, his jaw tightening. I fought for the Confederacy, Miss Mitchell, and I am not proud of it now. But at the time, I thought I was defending my home. When I came back after Appomattox, I found that Emily had died of fever 2 years earlier. No one had been able to reach me to tell me, and the ranch had been seized for unpaid taxes. Taxes I could not pay because I was off fighting a war. A carpetbagger owned it by then, bought it for pennies on the dollar in a tax sale, just like Sinclair is trying to do to you. Sarah felt her anger drain away, replaced by sympathy. I am sorry. I tried to get it back, Cole continued, his eyes distant with memory. Offered to pay the taxes plus interest, even offered to buy it outright for fair value. The man refused, sent me away with nothing. He just wanted to own what I had built, wanted the satisfaction of having it. I drifted for a while after that, working cattle drives, doing some scouting for the army, even some law work. I saved my money, invested carefully, got lucky a few times with cattle sales and a silver claim in Colorado. Now I have more money than I need and nothing to spend it on. He looked directly at Sarah again. When I saw your ranch, saw how well maintained it was, despite obvious financial troubles, it reminded me of my place in Texas. And when I overheard Sinclair pressuring you today, I saw a chance to stop someone like him from winning, just once. That is my ulterior motive, Miss Mitchell. Revenge against a type of man, not against you. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only sincerity and old grief. That is quite a story, Mr. Donovan. But forgive me if I find it hard to believe that someone would give away $20,000 for revenge against a type of person. Cole's lips quirked in something that was not quite a smile. When you have money and no one to share it with, it loses its meaning, Miss Mitchell. I would rather spend it on something that matters, even if that something is just stopping a thief like Sinclair from stealing a dead man's legacy from his daughter. Besides, he added, his tone lightening slightly, I did not say I would give away $20,000. I would only be out $7,000, the amount needed to clear the debts. You would be signing over your ranch to me in exchange for that $20,000, and then I would be gifting the property back to you free and clear. Legally, it is all proper. But you would still lose $7,000, Sarah pointed out. True enough, but I have spent more than that on worse causes, I assure you. Cole leaned back in his chair, watching her process his offer. Look, Miss Mitchell, I understand this is strange. You do not know me, you have no reason to trust me, and it probably sounds too good to be true. But the offer is genuine. If you accept, I will ride out to the Circle M tomorrow with my banker's draft for $20,000. We will draw up a proper bill of sale with a witness. I will take the deed. And we will go into town together to pay off Sinclair. Once that is done and recorded with the county clerk, I will sign the deed over to you in front of the same witnesses. By tomorrow night, You will own your ranch free and clear, and I will ride on." Sarah's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this had to be a trick, a con, some scheme she was too naive to see through. Men did not simply give away property and money to strangers out of the goodness of their hearts, not in her experience. But when she looked at Cole Donovan, at the steady, sad honesty in his dark eyes, she found herself wanting to believe him. More than that, she found herself without better options. In 2 more days, Sinclair would take the ranch anyway, and she would have nothing. "How do I know you will really sign it back to me?" she asked quietly. "Once you own it, you could just refuse. What guarantee do I have?" "None," Cole admitted, "except my word, which I know means nothing to you since we just met. But I can put it in writing if that helps. I can sign a promissory document stating my intention to transfer the property, witnessed and notarized. It would not hold up in court necessarily, but it would at least show my intentions were genuine if I failed to follow through." Sarah made her decision, though she still felt like she was leaping off a cliff into darkness. "All right, Mr. Donovan, I accept your offer, but I want everything in writing, every step documented, with witnesses to every transaction." Cole nodded gravely and extended his hand across the table. "Agreed. You have my word, Miss Mitchell, for what it is worth. I will be at the Circle M tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp." Sarah shook his hand, feeling the calluses that marked him as a working man despite his money and the strength in his grip that he carefully moderated. His hand was warm and steady, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through her that she tried to ignore. This was a business arrangement, nothing more, no matter how handsome or tragic Cole Donovan might be. 9 o'clock, she agreed. "I will have everything ready." That night, Sarah barely slept, half convinced that Cole Donovan would not appear in the morning, that it had all been some elaborate joke, or that she had misunderstood somehow. But when dawn broke clear and beautiful over the ranch, she forced herself to go through her morning routine, feeding the chickens, checking on the horses, helping the ranch hands with the morning chores. She said nothing to Jake, Tom, or Pete about the possible salvation coming at 9 o'clock, afraid to hope out loud. At 8:30, she was bathed and dressed in her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, her blonde hair pinned up neatly. She felt ridiculous, primping for what should be a simple business transaction, but she wanted to meet Cole Donovan as an equal, not as a desperate woman in work clothes. At 9 o'clock exactly, she heard hoofbeats and watched from the porch as Cole Donovan rode up the drive on a magnificent black horse. He was dressed more formally than yesterday, in a clean white shirt under a dark vest, his hat free of dust, his gun belt polished. When he dismounted and climbed the porch steps, he removed his hat and gave her a small bow that was somehow respectful without being mocking. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for trusting me enough to let me come." "Mr. Donovan," she replied, her throat tight, "I confess I am still not entirely sure this is real." He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded bank draft, which he handed to her. Sarah unfolded it with trembling fingers and stared at the amount, made out to cash from a Denver bank. $20,000, just as he had promised. "It is real," Cole said quietly. "Now, shall we handle the paperwork? I took the liberty of stopping at the lawyer's office in town this morning and having him draw up the necessary documents. He is waiting in town to witness and notarize everything." The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork and witnesses. Cole's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Morrison who seemed honest enough, reviewed all the documents carefully. Jake was called in to serve as an additional witness as Cole paid Sarah the $20,000 in exchange for the deed to the Circle M. The money was immediately deposited in the Territorial Bank, an account in Sarah's name, while Cole took possession of the deed. Then they rode into Elkhorn together, Sarah, Cole, Morrison the lawyer, and Jake as witness. Thomas Sinclair's expression when they walked into his office was something Sarah would treasure forever. The banker's face went from oily welcome to shocked disbelief to barely concealed fury as Cole counted out $7,000 in cash drawn from Sarah's new account to satisfy all debts against the property. "This is most irregular," Sinclair blustered, his face reddening. "There are procedures, processing times." "The procedures are quite simple," Morrison the lawyer said crisply. "The debts are being paid in full, in cash, immediately. You will accept payment and release all claims against the property, or I will file a complaint with the Territorial Banking Commission for fraud and usury. Your choice, Mr. Sinclair." Sinclair had no choice and knew it. With shaking hands and barely controlled rage, he accepted the payment and signed the release documents. By noon, it was done. The debts were paid, the records filed with the county clerk, and Cole Donovan was the legal owner of the Circle M Ranch. They had lunch at the restaurant where this had all begun, the same corner table, though this time the meal was celebratory. Or should have been. Sarah found herself strangely melancholy as reality set in. Cole owned her ranch now. He had promised to give it back, had even signed a letter of intent that Morrison had witnessed. But promises could be broken. Men change their minds. She had traded one potential disaster for another, though at least this disaster came with a handsome face and kind eyes. "You are wondering if I will actually do it," Cole said perceptively, setting down his coffee cup. "Sign it back to you." "The thought had crossed my mind," Sarah admitted. "It is a natural concern. But Miss Mitchell, I need you to understand something. I meant what I said yesterday about revenge being my motive, but it is not my only reason for doing this." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When I lost Emily and the ranch, I lost my purpose. For 5 years I have been drifting, making money but not living, just existing. Helping you, stopping Sinclair, it gives me something I have not had in a long time. It makes me feel like my life has meaning again, even if just for a day. So I am not doing this entirely selflessly. I am doing it because it makes me feel human again." Sarah felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears at the raw honesty in his voice. "That may be the saddest thing I have ever heard, Mr. Donovan." "Probably, but it is the truth." Cole signaled for the check. "Now, shall we go back to the county clerk and transfer that deed back to its rightful owner?" The ride back to the courthouse was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Sarah kept stealing glances at Cole, this mysterious broken man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. He sat his horse like he was born to it, easy and natural, his dark eyes scanning the street out of old habit, always watching for trouble. There was something about him that called to her, a recognition of shared pain perhaps, or simply the attraction of a handsome man who had saved her from ruin. She told herself not to be foolish, that he would sign over the deed and ride away, and she would never see him again. But in the clerk's office, as Cole signed the deed transferring the Circle M Ranch back to Sarah Mitchell, sole owner, something unexpected happened. His hand holding the pen hesitated for just a moment, and he looked up at her with an expression of such longing and loss that Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Miss Mitchell," he said quietly while Morrison and the clerk pretended not to listen, "would you consider allowing me to stay on at the Circle M for a while? As a ranch hand, not as an owner. I have been on the move for so long, and your place, well, it feels like somewhere I could rest for a spell. I am a good worker, I will earn my keep, and I would not be any trouble." Sarah knew she should say no. Every practical bone in her body screamed that having this man around would be complicated, that her growing attraction to him was dangerous, that she needed to rebuild her life without entanglements. But what came out of her mouth was, "Yes, I would like that very much, Mr. Donovan." "Cole," he said, a real smile finally touching his lips. "If I am going to be working for you, you should call me Cole." "All right, Cole, and you should call me Sarah." The deed was signed, witnessed, and recorded. Sarah Mitchell was once again the sole legal owner of the Circle M, free and clear of all debt. And Cole Donovan, the stranger who had given her back her life, was coming home with her. The ride back to the ranch was different than the tense trip into town had been. Cole rode beside Sarah, pointing out things he had noticed about the property on his previous pass-through, asking questions about water sources and grazing rotation that showed his deep knowledge of ranching. Sarah found herself relaxing in his presence, responding to his questions with enthusiasm, even laughing at a wry observation he made about Sinclair's face when they had paid off the debts. "I thought he might have an apoplexy right there in his office," Cole said with a grin. That vein in his forehead was throbbing something fierce. "It was rather satisfying," Sarah admitted, "though I suspect we have not heard the last from him. He is a vindictive man." Cole's expression sobered. "Then we will be careful. But he has no legal claim to your property now, Sarah. He cannot touch you." The "we" in that sentence warmed Sarah more than it should have. She barely knew this man, yet already he was including himself in her troubles, standing beside her against future threats. It was both comforting and terrifying. When they arrived at the ranch, Jake, Tom, and Pete were waiting anxiously in the yard. Sarah dismounted and held up the deed with a wide smile. "It is done. The ranch is ours again, free and clear." The three ranch hands let out whoops of joy, slapping each other on the back. Jake approached Cole with his hand extended. "Mister, I do not know exactly what you did, but Miss Sarah looks happier than she has in months, so I figure you are responsible. Thank you." Cole shook his hand firmly. "Just did what was right, and I am going to be staying on for a while, working as a hand if you all will have me. Name is Cole Donovan." Pete squinted at Cole appraisingly. "You any good with cattle?" "Fair to middling," Cole said modestly. "Spent most of my life ranching, so I know one end of a cow from the other." "Then you are hired," Sarah said officially. "Same terms as Jake, Tom, and Pete, though I can actually pay you all now." The realization hit her fresh, bringing tears to her eyes again. "I can pay you, I can buy supplies, I can fix the barn roof. We can actually run this ranch properly." That night, Sarah treated everyone to a celebratory dinner at the main house, cooking up a feast from their stores. The hands were initially awkward about eating at the main house rather than the bunkhouse, but Sarah insisted, and the evening became a joyous celebration. Cole fit in easily, swapping ranching stories with Pete and Jake, asking Tom about the horses with genuine interest. But Sarah noticed that his eyes often found her across the table, holding her gaze for a moment before looking away. And each time it happened, she felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the day's events and everything to do with the man himself. After dinner, Cole helped her clear the dishes despite her protests. "I am working for you now, remember? That means I help with whatever needs doing." "I do not recall dishwashing being part of a ranch hand's duties," Sarah said with amusement, but she was secretly pleased by his company. The house always felt too empty and quiet after the hands retired to the bunkhouse. "Then I am starting a new tradition?" Cole carefully dried a plate with a kitchen towel, looking oddly domestic despite his size and the gun that still hung at his hip. "This is a good place, Sarah. Your father built something solid here. You should be proud." "I am," she said softly. "He was a good man. He died trying to buy new breeding stock, got caught in a flash flood on the way back from Montana. They found his body 2 weeks later, but the money and the cattle were gone, washed away. That is how we ended up in debt. He had borrowed money for the purchase, expecting to pay it back quickly with breeding fees. He was building for the future," Cole said. "That is the mark of a good rancher. I am sorry you lost him." "Thank you." Sarah scrubbed at a stubborn pot, using the activity to hide the emotions his sympathy stirred up. "What was your wife like? Emily, you said?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah worried she had overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice distant with memory. "She was small, barely came up to my shoulder, with red hair and more freckles than seemed possible on one person. She laughed a lot, and she sang while she worked. Not well, mind you, but enthusiastically. She made me feel like I was better than I actually was, like I could accomplish anything. Losing her was like losing my compass. I have been lost ever since." 5 years is a long time to be lost," Sarah said gently. "It is." Cole set down the dried plate and turned to face her. "But I think maybe I am finding my way back. Being here, having a purpose again, even if it is just for a little while, it helps." They stood there in the kitchen, the lamplight casting warm shadows, and Sarah felt the air between them thicken with something unspoken. Cole was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the faint scent of leather and sage that clung to him. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and her heart raced at the possibility. But then Cole stepped back, breaking the moment. "I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow is a work day, and the boss lady seems pretty demanding." His tone was light, teasing, but Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. "The boss lady knows how to appreciate hard workers," she replied, matching his tone even as disappointment settled in her chest. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Sarah." She watched him walk out into the night toward the bunkhouse, his tall figure soon swallowed by darkness, and wondered what she was getting herself into. The smart thing would be to keep this relationship purely professional, employer and employee, nothing more. But her heart apparently had not received that message. It hammered in her chest every time Cole looked at her, and she caught herself watching for him throughout the day, finding excuses to work near wherever he was assigned. The next weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Cole proved to be every bit the experienced rancher he had claimed, working alongside the other hands from dawn to dusk. He repaired fences, helped round up strays, gentled a green-broke horse that had been giving Tom trouble, and never once traded on his role as Sarah's benefactor. He took orders from her just like the other hands, and slowly Jake, Tom, and Pete came to respect him, not just for what he had done, but for who he was. Sarah found herself falling into something she had not experienced in a very long time: happiness. With the ranch debts cleared, she could breathe again. She bought the supplies they had been putting off, hired 2 more hands to help with the heavy work, and began planning for the future. The cattle were thriving on summer grass, the horses were in top condition, and everything her father had built was secure again. But underneath the satisfaction of a ranch running well was a growing awareness of Cole Donovan that Sarah could not ignore. He was always there, steady and capable, but also watching her with those dark eyes that held volumes of unspoken thoughts. They talked in the evenings sometimes, after the work was done, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the Wyoming hills. He told her stories about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the mistakes he had made as a young rancher, and the lessons they had taught him. She told him about her mother, who had died when Sarah was 12, about growing up as the only girl in a world of cowboys, about learning to be strong because her father needed her to be. The more time they spent together, the more Sarah realized she was falling in love with him. It was not the sudden, overwhelming passion of dime novels, but something deeper and more solid. She loved the way he laughed, rare but genuine. She loved his quiet competence, the way he could fix anything and solve any problem with patience and skill. She loved his kindness, how he always had time to help even when he was exhausted, how he treated the younger ranch hands with respect and took time to teach them. And she loved the hints of vulnerability he showed her in private moments, the sadness that still lingered in his eyes, the way he sometimes seemed surprised by his own happiness. But Cole kept a careful distance between them, friendly, but never crossing the line into anything more. Sarah told herself it was for the best, that he was still mourning his wife, that she should not expect anything from him. But her heart ached every time he said goodnight and walked away. Every time his hand brushed hers accidentally and he pulled back quickly. Every time she caught him looking at her with longing before he shuttered his expression. A month after Cole's arrival, trouble found them in the form of Thomas Sinclair. The banker arrived at the ranch in mid-afternoon, accompanied by a rough-looking man Sarah did not recognize. She was working in the garden behind the house when she heard raised voices from the front yard and came around to find Cole standing between Sinclair and the porch steps, his posture relaxed, but his hand resting casually near his gun. "I am telling you that you are trespassing, Mr. Sinclair, and you need to leave." Cole's voice was calm, but held an edge of steel that made Sarah's breath catch. "This does not concern you, cowboy," Sinclair spat, his face red with anger. "I have business with Miss Mitchell." "Then you can conduct it in town, through proper channels," Cole replied. "You have no business being on her property, and you were told to leave. So, leave." The rough man with Sinclair, clearly hired muscle, stepped forward threateningly. "Maybe we should teach this ranch hand some manners, Mr. Sinclair." Before the situation could escalate further, Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and commanding. "Mr. Sinclair, Cole is correct. You have no business here. I paid your debts in full, the records are filed, and you have no claim on my property or my time. Leave now, or I will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing." Sinclair's eyes, when they turned to her, were filled with such malice that Sarah took an involuntary step back. "You think you are very clever, do not you? Miss Mitchell, finding some fool with money to bail you out. But that will not save you. This ranch should be mine, and I will find a way to get it." "That sounds like a threat," Jake said quietly, appearing from the barn with Tom and Pete behind him. All 3 were armed, and suddenly Sinclair and his hired thug were very much outnumbered. The banker looked around, calculating odds, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. "This is not over," he hissed at Sarah. "You will regret crossing me." "The only thing I regret is that my father ever trusted you with his business," Sarah shot back. "Now get off my land." Sinclair and his companion retreated to their buggy and drove away in a cloud of dust and muttered curses. The moment they were out of sight, Sarah felt her knees go weak, and she would have fallen if Cole had not caught her elbow, steadying her. "Are you all right?" His face was close to hers, concern etched in every line. "I am fine. she managed, though she was shaking. Just angry. How dare he come here and threaten me? Men like Sinclair do not take losing well, Cole said grimly. We need to be careful, Sarah. He meant that threat. Let him try something, Pete growled. We will be ready for him. But being ready for trouble and avoiding it were two different things, and over the next weeks, small problems began to plague the ranch. Fences were cut in the night, allowing cattle to wander. A barn door was found open one morning, though everyone swore they had locked it. Supplies went missing from the storeroom. Nothing major, nothing that could be definitively blamed on sabotage, but enough to be worrying. Cole took to sleeping in the barn loft, keeping watch, and twice he chased off figures lurking near the outbuildings in the darkness. They never caught anyone, but the message was clear. Sinclair was waging a war of attrition, trying to make running the ranch difficult and expensive. Through it all, Cole was Sarah's rock, always calm, always thinking ahead, always ready to deal with whatever crisis arose. And Sarah found herself leaning on him more and more, not just for ranch business, but for emotional support. He understood her frustration and fear without her having to explain. He knew when she needed to talk and when she needed silence. He anticipated her needs in a way that was both comforting and unsettling in its intimacy. One evening in late August, after another long day of repairs necessitated by sabotage, Sarah finally broke. She and Cole were alone on the porch, the other hands having gone into town for supplies, and the weight of constant vigilance just became too much. She started crying, angry tears of frustration, and before she could stop herself, she was sobbing into her hands. Cole moved without hesitation, crossing the porch and pulling her into his arms. Sarah stiffened for just a moment, then melted against his chest, clutching his shirt as she cried out months of stress and fear and loneliness. He held her firmly but gently, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, not saying anything, just offering solid, steady support. When her tears finally subsided, Sarah became aware of several things at once. The steady beat of Cole's heart under her ear, the warmth of his body against hers, the strength of his arms around her, and the fact that she never wanted to move from this spot. She pulled back reluctantly, wiping at her face. I am sorry. That was unprofessional of me. Sarah, look at me. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. When she met his eyes, she saw something in them that made her breath catch. You are not just my employer. You have not been for a while now, and we both know it. You are allowed to be human, to be afraid, to need support, and I am glad to give it. What am I to you then? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a remaining tear. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You are the reason I am smiling again, after 5 years of feeling dead inside. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I am falling in love with you, even though I know I should not be, even though I know it is too soon and too complicated, and maybe not fair to Emily's memory. Sarah's heart felt like it might burst. Cole, Wait, he interrupted gently. Before you say anything, you need to know something. I am not the same man I was before the war. I have done things, seen things that changed me. I have killed men, Sarah, not just in battle but afterward, when I was working as a lawman. I have a past that is not entirely respectable, and I am still carrying grief for Emily that might never fully go away. You deserve someone whole and uncomplicated, not a broken-down cowboy with too much baggage. Sarah reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing his palm more firmly against her cheek. I do not want someone uncomplicated, Cole. I want someone real, and you are the most real person I have ever met. You saved my ranch, but more than that, you gave me hope again. You made me remember what it is like to look forward to tomorrow. I am falling in love with you too, and I do not care about your past or your grief. We all carry scars. The question is whether we let them define us or whether we choose to heal. Cole's eyes searched her face, and whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. If we do this, if we try this, I am all in, Sarah. I do not do anything halfway. I want a future here, with you, building something together, but only if that is what you want too. It is, Sarah said firmly. It absolutely is. Cole bent his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Sarah rose on her tiptoes to meet him halfway. Their lips met gently at first, a careful exploration, Then, with growing passion, as months of denied attraction finally found expression, Cole's arms tightened around her, and Sarah's hands slid up to tangle in his hair, and for a long, perfect moment, nothing existed except the two of them and the feeling of finally coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first day I saw you in that restaurant, looking so fierce and stubborn and beautiful. I have wanted you to do that almost as long," Sarah admitted with a laugh. "I was beginning to think you never would." "I was trying to be honorable," Cole said wryly. "Turns out I am not as good at that as I thought." They stood there wrapped in each other's arms as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Sarah felt something settle in her soul. Whatever happened with Sinclair, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. She was not alone anymore. The next morning, Sarah woke with a sense of purpose that had been missing before. She and Cole had talked late into the night, making plans, discussing the future, and somewhere around midnight, Cole had formally asked if he could court her properly. Sarah had laughed and pointed out that courtship usually came before declarations of love and passionate kissing, but she had agreed with a full heart. Now, watching him work with the horses in the corral, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his dark hair glinting in the morning sun, Sarah felt a surge of pure happiness. This man was hers, and she was his, and together they would build something lasting. But happiness made them slightly less vigilant than they should have been, and that afternoon, while Cole and Jake were moving cattle in the south pasture and the other hands were occupied with various tasks, Thomas Sinclair made his move. Sarah was in the ranch office working on the books when she heard horses approaching fast. She looked out the window to see Sinclair with 4 hired guns, rough-looking men with tied-down holsters and mean eyes. Her heart lurched with fear, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had a rifle in the office and she knew how to use it, but before she could reach it, the men burst through the door. Sinclair's face was twisted with triumph and malice. "Hello, Miss Mitchell. I believe we have some unfinished business." Sarah backed away slowly, her mind racing. "If you hurt me, you will hang. Everyone knows about your grudge against me." "Who said anything about hurting you?" Sinclair pulled out a document. "You are going to sign this, transferring ownership of the Circle M to me, willingly, of your own free will. Then you are going to leave Wyoming and never come back. Do this, and no one gets hurt." "And if I refuse?" Sarah's hand inched toward the desk drawer where she kept a small pistol. One of the hired guns pulled his weapon and aimed it at her. "Then things get unpleasant for that cowboy of yours. Cole Donovan, is it not? My men have rifles trained on him right now, out in that south pasture. You sign, he lives. You refuse, he dies. Simple choice, really." Sarah's blood ran cold. They had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Sinclair gestured to one of his men, who opened the office door and whistled sharply. A moment later, a gunshot echoed from the south pasture, followed by shouting. "That was a warning shot. The next one will not be. Now sign the damn paper." Sarah's hands shook as she took the pen Sinclair offered. She could not let Cole die, not because of her, not when he had just given her a reason to hope again. But signing this document would make everything he had done for her meaningless. The ranch would belong to Sinclair, and she would have nothing. As she bent over the document, stalling for time, she heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked from behind the filing cabinet. "I would not do that if I were you, miss." Pete stepped out from his hiding place, his old Winchester pointed steadily at Sinclair's head. "And you boys might want to drop those guns before my friends join the party." Tom appeared in the doorway behind the hired guns, his shotgun leveled. A moment later, the sound of more horses approaching fast made everyone freeze. Cole burst through the door like an avenging angel, his gun drawn and his face dark with fury. Jake was right behind him, also armed. "Seems like your men in the south pasture are not as good at their jobs as you thought, Sinclair," Cole said, his voice deadly calm. "We spotted them setting up an hour ago and circled back. They are currently tied up in the barn, being guarded by our newest hand." Sarah nearly collapsed with relief. It had been a test, a bluff to smoke out Sinclair's play, and it had worked. Cole's eyes found hers across the room, and the look in them was both fierce and tender, checking that she was unharmed. Sinclair looked around wildly, realizing he was caught. You cannot prove anything. I was just here to make a legitimate business offer. With 4 armed men? Jake said skeptically. And those boys we caught were happy to talk about who hired them and why, once we explained that attempting murder carries a hanging sentence. Speaking of which, Cole continued, moving to Sarah's side, his gun never wavering from Sinclair, the sheriff is on his way. Should be here within the hour. I sent someone for him when we spotted your ambush being set up. I expect he will be very interested in hearing about attempted extortion, trespassing with intent, conspiracy to commit murder, and anything else we can think of. The fight went out of Sinclair like air from a punctured balloon. His face went from red to pale gray as the reality of his situation sank in. Please, I will leave. I will never bother you again. Just do not involve the law. You should have thought of that before you threatened my family, Sarah said coldly, moving to Cole's side. The word family was deliberate, and she felt Cole's hand find hers, squeezing gently. When the sheriff arrived, he took statements from everyone, including Sinclair's hired guns, who fell over themselves to implicate the banker in hopes of lighter sentences. Sinclair was arrested and taken to town to await trial. The sheriff, a weathered man named Carson, who had known Sarah's father, shook his head in disgust. George would be proud of how you handled this, Sarah. Kept your head, did not panic, trusted your people. That is good ranching and good living. He tipped his hat to Cole. And you, Donovan, I heard what you did, buying this place and giving it back to her. That is about the most decent thing I have heard of in 20 years of law work. You planning to stick around? If Sarah will have me, yes, sir, Cole replied, his arm sliding around Sarah's waist in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. I will have him, Sarah confirmed, leaning into Cole's warmth, for as long as he wants to stay. Looks like that might be a good long while, the sheriff said with a knowing smile. Congratulations to you both. And Miss Sarah, you do not need to worry about Sinclair anymore. With all the charges against him and the testimony we have, he will be in prison for a very long time. After the sheriff left with his prisoners, the ranch erupted in celebration. The hands whooped and congratulated each other on a job well done. Sarah found herself passed from hug to hug, everyone relieved that the threat was finally over, but through it all, her eyes kept finding Cole. And finally, she broke away from the group and went to him. He was standing slightly apart, watching the celebration with a small smile, and when she approached, he opened his arms without hesitation. Sarah walked into his embrace, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face against his chest. I thought I was going to lose you, she murmured. When they said they had rifles on you, I was ready to sign anything. I know, I am sorry we had to let it go that far. But we needed to catch him in the act, with witnesses. Or he would have just kept trying. Cole kissed the top of her head. It is over now, Sarah. Really over. The ranch is safe, you are safe, and we can start building our future. Our future? Sarah repeated, loving the sound of those words. I like that. Good, because I have plans. Cole pulled back enough to look down at her, his dark eyes warm with love and humor. Big plans, starting with courting you properly the way you deserve, flowers, picnics, maybe even a dance or two if the town has a social. Then, if you are agreeable, I plan to marry you, and after that, we are going to build this ranch into the finest operation in Wyoming territory, raise some kids, grow old together. How does that sound? It sounds perfect, Sarah said, her eyes stinging with happy tears. Absolutely perfect. Cole bent to kiss her, and this time, when the ranch hands whooped and hollered their approval, neither of them cared. They were too busy kissing to notice. The next months were the happiest of Sarah's life. True to his word, Cole courted her properly despite the fact that they lived and worked on the same property, and everyone knew they were in love. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, taking time out of his workday to ride out and pick them himself. He took her on picnics by the creek, spreading a blanket and sharing meals while they talked about everything and nothing. He danced with her in the barn during a birthday celebration for Pete, holding her close and moving with surprising grace for such a big man. And slowly, carefully, they knit their lives together. Cole moved some of his belongings into the main house, taking over the spare room at first, though everyone knew it was only a matter of time before he and Sarah would share a room properly. They worked side by side during the day, planning improvements to the ranch, discussing which cattle to sell and which to keep for breeding, making decisions together as equal partners. In October, as the aspen leaves turned gold and the air gained a crisp edge, Cole asked Sarah to ride out with him after dinner. He was quieter than usual, almost nervous, and Sarah teased him about it as they saddled their horses. "What are you being so mysterious about? Are you finally going to show me that secret fishing spot you keep hinting about?" "Something better than that," Cole promised, helping her mount even though she could do it perfectly well herself. His hand lingered on her leg for a moment, and the heat in his eyes made Sarah's breath catch. They rode to the northern edge of the property, where the land rose in a gentle hill overlooking the entire ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and below them, the Circle M spread out like a patchwork quilt of pastures, buildings, and stands of trees. It was beautiful, and Sarah said so. "It is beautiful," Cole agreed. "And it is ours. Or it could be, if you agree to something." Sarah turned to look at him, her heart beginning to race. Cole dismounted and came to help her down, but instead of releasing her when her feet touched the ground, he kept his hands on her waist, looking down at her with such intensity that she forgot to breathe. "Sarah Mitchell, I came to Wyoming territory lost and broken, with more money than purpose, drifting through life without any real direction. Then I saw you, fierce and stubborn and beautiful, fighting to save something you loved, and everything changed. You gave me a reason to care again, to hope again, to live again. These past months with you have been the best of my life, better even than I remember life being before I lost everything. You are my best friend, my partner, my love, and I cannot imagine a future without you in it." Cole reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small box, dropping to one knee in the dirt. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not have much to offer you that you do not already have," Cole continued, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "You have the ranch, you have money now, you have independence, but I can offer you my heart, my loyalty, my strength, and every day of the rest of my life. Will you marry me, Sarah? Will you let me be your husband, your partner, the father of your children if we are blessed with them? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve to be loved?" "Yes," Sarah sobbed, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times. Yes." Cole's face broke into a smile of pure joy, and he slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and they were both laughing and crying and holding each other as the sun set over their land, their future, their home. They were married 6 weeks later, on a crisp November day when the sky was so blue it hurt to look at, and the air smelled of wood smoke and coming winter. The ceremony was held at the ranch, with a traveling preacher officiating and every rancher, townsperson, and friend they had accumulated in attendance. Sarah wore a dress of ivory silk that she had ordered from Denver, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cole wore a new black suit that made him look devastatingly handsome, though he fidgeted with the tie like it was trying to strangle him. Jake stood up as Cole's best man, and Sarah asked Pete to walk her down the aisle since her father could not. The old ranch hand cried through the entire ceremony, but he stood proud and tall as he placed Sarah's hand in Cole's, giving his blessing to the union. The vows were traditional, but when Cole promised to love and cherish Sarah all the days of his life, his voice broke with emotion, and when Sarah promised the same, she meant every word with her entire heart. When the preacher finally said, "You may kiss your bride," Cole swept Sarah into his arms and kissed her so thoroughly that the crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. The celebration that followed was legendary in Elkhorn for years to come. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by neighbors. Musicians played fiddles and guitars, and dancing went on until long after dark. Sarah danced with Cole, with the ranch hands, with neighbors and friends, but her eyes always returned to her husband, standing tall and handsome, and smiling more than anyone had ever seen him smile. Late in the evening, when the party was still going strong, Cole caught Sarah's hand and pulled her away from the crowd, leading her toward the house. Their house now, legally and morally. Sarah felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation as Cole closed the door behind them, shutting out the noise of the celebration. "Alone at last, Mrs. Donovan," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "Mrs. Donovan," Sarah repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Cole kissed her gently, then with growing passion, his hands moving to the buttons of her dress. "I have wanted you for so long, Sarah. Wanted to hold you like this, touch you like this, love you like this. Then do not wait any longer," Sarah whispered against his lips. I am yours, Cole. Completely and forever yours. Their wedding night was everything Sarah had hoped it would be, tender and passionate and perfect. Cole was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Sarah felt something click into place in her soul, a sense of rightness and completion that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, lying in Cole's arms in the big bed that had been her father's and was now theirs, Sarah traced the scars on his chest, marks of old battles and hard living. "Tell me about these," she said softly. "I want to know everything about you, every story, every moment that made you who you are." Cole caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her palm. "That will take a lifetime, Mrs. Donovan." "Good thing we have a lifetime then," Sarah replied, snuggling closer. "I love you, Cole. Thank you for saving my ranch. Thank you for giving me back my future. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," Cole whispered into her hair. "Thank you for giving this broken-down cowboy a reason to live again. I love you, Sarah, more than I have words to express." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the celebration finally dying down outside, and Sarah's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she was the luckiest woman in Wyoming territory. The first year of their marriage flew by in a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Cole threw himself into improving the ranch with the same dedication he brought to everything he did. They built a new barn to replace the old one that had been patched and repatched for years. They brought in new breeding stock, carefully selected cattle that would improve the herd's quality. They hired 3 more hands as the operation expanded, good men who respected Sarah and Cole both. But the best part of that year was simply living with Cole, learning his rhythms and quirks, his likes and dislikes, the 1,000 small details that made up a life together. Sarah learned that he hummed while he worked, old war songs and hymns mixed together. She learned that he always woke before dawn, moving quietly so as not to disturb her, and that he brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings when they allowed themselves to sleep late. She learned that he had a wicked sense of humor that came out when he was relaxed and happy, and that he could make her laugh until her sides hurt with his dry observations about life and people. Cole learned that Sarah talked in her sleep sometimes, usually about cattle or fencing. He learned that she liked her bathwater almost scalding hot, and that she sang off-key while washing dishes. He learned that she was fiercely protective of anyone she considered family, and that her temper, while slow to rouse, was formidable once sparked. And he learned that loving her, being loved by her, was the greatest gift he had ever received. They had their first fight 6 months into the marriage, over something stupid that Cole could not even remember a week later. Sarah had slammed out of the house and ridden off alone, and Cole had spent 2 miserable hours thinking their marriage was over before she came back, apologized for overreacting, and kissed him until he forgot what they had been arguing about. They learned that disagreements did not mean disaster, that they could fight and make up and be stronger for it. In the spring, Sarah began feeling unwell in the mornings, and the town doctor confirmed what they had both already suspected. Sarah was pregnant, due to give birth in late autumn. Cole's reaction was everything Sarah could have hoped for, swinging her in a circle despite her laughing protests, his face alight with joy. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Sarah confirmed, her hands resting on her still flat stomach. "Are you ready to be a father?" "I do not know," Cole admitted, "but I know I will do everything in my power to be a good one, to give our child the kind of life they deserve." Cole became almost comically protective as Sarah's pregnancy progressed. He tried to prevent her from doing any heavy work, which led to their second and third fights because Sarah refused to be treated like an invalid. They compromised eventually, with Sarah agreeing not to lift anything heavy or ride unbroken horses, and Cole agreeing to stop hovering quite so obviously. The pregnancy was healthy and normal, though Sarah grew increasingly uncomfortable as summer heat bore down and her belly swelled. Cole was endlessly patient with her mood swings, her sudden cravings for bizarre food combinations, her tears over nothing at all. He rubbed her swollen feet every evening and never complained when she kicked him accidentally in her sleep. In October, as the leaves turned gold again and the air grew crisp, Sarah went into labor. Cole rode for the doctor and the neighboring women who had promised to help, then was summarily kicked out of the bedroom by Mrs. Henderson, a formidable rancher's wife who had delivered half the babies in the county. "This is women's work, Mr. Donovan. You go pace somewhere else and try not to worry. Your wife is strong as an ox and will be just fine." Cole paced in the parlor for 12 hours, occasionally hearing Sarah cry out from upstairs and feeling like his heart was being ripped from his chest. Jake, Tom, and Pete kept him company, playing cards and pretending they were not all terrified. Finally, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, a baby's cry rang through the house, strong and indignant. "Mrs. Henderson appeared at the top of the stairs, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. Donovan, you have a son. Mother and baby are both healthy. You can come up now, but do not tire her out. She has been through a lot." Cole took the stairs 3 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Sarah was propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. When she looked up at Cole, her eyes were shining with tears and joy. "Cole, meet your son." Cole approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was scrunching up his face like he was contemplating whether to cry again. He was the most beautiful thing Cole had ever seen, aside from his mother. "Can I hold him?" Cole asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Of course. He is yours too." Sarah carefully transferred the baby to Cole's arms, showing him how to support the head. Cole looked down at his son, this perfect little person who was half him and half Sarah, and felt something break open in his chest. All the pain of his past, all the grief and loss and years of wandering suddenly seemed worth it because they had led him here, to this moment, to this family. Tears streamed down his face unchecked. "Hello, little man," he whispered. "I am your father. I promise I will do everything I can to be worthy of that title. I will protect you, teach you, love you every day of your life. You are so wanted, so loved already." "What should we name him?" Sarah asked softly. Cole looked at his wife, this incredible woman who had given him everything, and then back at his son. "George," he said, "after your father, George Cole Donovan, if that is all right with you." Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears. "It is perfect. He would have been so proud." Little George Donovan proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who demanded attention at all hours. The first months were exhausting, with both Sarah and Cole stumbling through their days on too little sleep, learning how to care for this tiny person who depended on them for everything. But they were also magical months, watching George grow and change daily, seeing his personality emerge. He had Sarah's green eyes and Cole's dark hair, and he seemed to have inherited stubbornness from both parents. Cole was a devoted father, surprising himself with how naturally it came to him. He walked the floors with George when the baby was fussy, sang to him in his rumbling baritone, changed diapers without complaint, and generally made a fool of himself making faces to elicit one of George's rare early smiles. Sarah watched her strong, capable cowboy turn to moosh over their son, and loved him even more for it. The ranch continued to prosper. With Cole's expertise and Sarah's determination, the Circle M became known as one of the best-run operations in Wyoming territory. They built a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing, and buyers came from all over to purchase their stock. The railroad spur came through as predicted, making it easier to ship cattle to market, and land values in the area soared. Sarah calculated that the ranch was now worth at least $40,000, double what it had been when Cole first saw it. "We should expand," Cole suggested one evening, as they sat on the porch, watching George play on a blanket at their feet. The boy was nearly a year old now, crawling everywhere, and pulling himself up on furniture, always moving, always exploring. "The Johnson property to the west is for sale, another 200 acres with good water. We could easily manage it with our current crew, maybe hire one more hand." "And here I thought you were the one always cautioning restraint," Sarah teased. "But you were right. We should expand while we have the capital, and the market is strong. Let us make an offer." They bought the Johnson property that fall, adding significantly to their holdings. The ranch now sprawled across 700 acres, supporting 300 head of cattle and 40 horses. It was a far cry from the struggling operation Sarah had been about to lose just 2 years earlier, and sometimes she still could not quite believe how much her life had changed. George took his first steps on his first birthday, letting go of the coffee table and toddling 3 steps into Cole's waiting arms. Both parents cheered like he had just won a race, and George, delighted by their reaction, clapped his chubby hands and demanded to do it again. Within a week, he was running, or attempting to, his little legs pumping as he explored every corner of the house and yard under his parents' watchful eyes. "He is going to be a handful," Sarah predicted, watching George try to climb onto a chair that was far too big for him. "He is our son," Cole replied with a grin. "Of course he is going to be a handful. Did you expect anything else?" That winter was hard, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but the ranch was prepared. Cole had ensured they had plenty of hay stored, and the cattle had shelter in the new barn and various lean-tos scattered across the property. The family spent the long winter evenings inside, playing with George, reading, and planning for the spring. Sarah taught Cole to play chess, and Cole taught Sarah some of the fiddle tunes he knew on an old instrument they found in the attic. They were not great players, but it passed the time pleasantly. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought warm winds and early flowers. Sarah discovered she was pregnant again, and this time Cole was even more ridiculous in his protectiveness, trying to prevent her from doing anything more strenuous than sitting in a chair. They fought about it more than once, but always made up quickly, neither able to stay angry at the other for long. Their daughter was born in January during a blizzard, arriving 3 weeks early in a rush that barely gave the midwife time to reach the ranch. Cole delivered his own daughter with the midwife shouting instructions from the doorway, having just arrived. He cut the cord with shaking hands and placed his daughter on Sarah's chest, both of them crying with relief that mother and baby were healthy despite the dramatic entrance. They named her Emily Rose, honoring Cole's first wife and the flower Sarah had carried in her wedding bouquet. Emily Rose had Sarah's blonde hair and Cole's dark eyes, and from the beginning, she was clearly going to be different from her rambunctious brother. Where George was all energy and noise, Emily was peaceful and observant, watching the world with solemn eyes. "She is going to be the smart one," Cole predicted, looking down at his week-old daughter as she studied his face intently. "George will be the adventurer, but Emily will be the thinker. Let us not pigeonhole them before they are even talking," Sarah laughed. "But I do see what you mean. She is very serious." With 2 young children, life at the ranch became even busier. Sarah reduced her outside work, focusing on managing the household and the children, though she still kept her hand in ranch decisions and bookkeeping. Cole took on more of the day-to-day operations, working alongside the ranch hands from dawn to dusk. They hired a young woman from town, Mary, to help with the children and housework, giving Sarah some breathing room. The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. George grew into a lively boy who wanted to do everything his father did, following Cole around the ranch and begging to help with chores. Cole indulged him, teaching him to ride almost as soon as he could walk steadily, showing him how to rope and brand and all the skills a rancher needed. Emily was quieter but equally curious, asking endless questions about everything she saw, wanting to understand how things worked. When George was 6 and Emily 4, Sarah gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and James, who arrived howling into the world and barely paused for breath afterward. They were identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Daniel shy and clingy, while James was bold and constantly getting into trouble. Cole joked that between the 4 children, they had every possible personality type covered. The Circle M continued to thrive and grow. They bought more adjacent land when it became available, eventually owning over 1,000 acres. The cattle herd numbered over 500 head, and they had 40 horses, including several prize breeding mares. They built a new larger house to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original ranch house for the foreman, Jake, who had married a widow from town and needed the space for his new family. Through it all, through the busy days and exhausting nights, the financial ups and downs, the challenges of raising 4 strong-willed children, Sarah and Cole remained deeply in love. They still made time for each other, still stole kisses in the barn when no one was looking, still sat on the porch after the children were in bed and talked about their days. Cole still brought Sarah wildflowers in the summer, and Sarah still made Cole's favorite apple pie, even though she claimed to hate baking. They had arguments, certainly, disagreements about how to discipline the children or manage the ranch, but they always worked through them, always came back to the fundamental truth that they were partners in all things. One evening in late summer, when George was 10, Emily 8, and the twins 6, Sarah and Cole sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter floating on the warm evening air. The ranch was peaceful and prosperous, the cattle were fat and healthy, and everything they had built together was solid and secure. "Do you ever think about that day in the restaurant?" Sarah asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. When you offered to buy my ranch and give it back to me, I thought you were crazy, or running a con, or both." Cole chuckled, his arm tightening around her waist. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and the bravest, standing up to Sinclair like that. I did not know then that you would become my whole world. I did not know that a broken-down cowboy with too much money and not enough sense would turn out to be the love of my life," Sarah teased, then turned serious. "But I would not change a single thing, Cole. Not one moment, not one decision. This life, this family, this love, it is everything I ever wanted, and more than I dreamed was possible." "For me, too," Cole said softly. "You saved me, Sarah, just as much as I saved your ranch. You gave me a reason to live again, to hope again, to be happy. You gave me a family and a home and a future. I am the luckiest man alive." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the desperate woman about to lose everything to the successful rancher's wife, from the stranger with a mysterious offer to the husband and father who was the center of their family, they had traveled a long, sometimes difficult road. But every step had been worth it. Every challenge overcome had made them stronger. And now they had everything that mattered. The years continued to pass in a steady, satisfying rhythm. George grew into a young man who looked remarkably like his father, tall and dark-haired, with the same quiet competence around cattle and horses. He took over more and more of the ranch responsibilities, working alongside Cole and learning everything there was to know about running a large operation. Emily developed into a beauty with a sharp mind, spending hours reading every book she could get her hands on and asking questions that often stumped her parents. She talked about becoming a teacher, maybe even going back east to one of the women's colleges, though the thought of her leaving made both Sarah and Cole's hearts ache. The twins, Daniel and James, remained opposites but inseparable. Daniel, studious and thoughtful, while James was the ranch daredevil, always trying to ride the greenest horses or rope the wildest steers. They kept their parents on their toes and caused more than a few gray hairs. The ranch itself became one of the largest and most successful in Wyoming, now a state rather than a territory. They employed over a dozen hands year-round, more during busy seasons, and their cattle brought top dollar at market. Cole's careful management and Sarah's business sense had built something that would last for generations. When George was 18, he approached his parents with a request. He wanted to marry Abigail Henderson, the daughter of the midwife who had delivered him all those years ago. Sarah and Cole exchanged glances, remembering being young and in love themselves, and gave their blessing. The wedding was held at the ranch, a joyous occasion that brought together 3 counties' worth of friends and neighbors. Standing beside George as he said his vows, Cole felt a bittersweet pride. His son was becoming a man, starting his own family, and while it was exactly what should happen, it still felt like losing something precious. "He will be fine," Sarah whispered, seeming to read his thoughts. "We raised him well. He knows what love looks like because he saw it every day in us." Emily decided to pursue her education, heading east to college when she was 18. The day they put her on the train, Sarah cried openly and Cole was not far behind. Their only daughter, their thoughtful, brilliant girl, was leaving to chase her dreams. But they were proud too, proud that she had the courage to go, proud that they had built a life secure enough that she could afford to pursue an education. The twins stayed closer to home, both finding their places on the ranch alongside George. Daniel, quieter and more analytical, took over the business side of operations, managing accounts and sales. James, still the daredevil, became the head wrangler, managing the horse breeding program with skill and enthusiasm. Between the 3 brothers, the ranch's future was secure. Cole and Sarah gradually stepped back from daily operations, though they never fully retired. They remained advisors and owners, available to help with decisions, but trusting their sons to manage the day-to-day work. It gave them more time for themselves, time to travel a bit, visiting Emily in Boston and taking a trip to San Francisco that they had talked about for years. But their favorite times were still the quiet evenings on the porch, now silver-haired and weathered, but still holding hands like newlyweds, watching the sun set over land they had fought for, bled for, and built into something magnificent. Their grandchildren played in the yard, George and Abigail's 3 so far, with more likely on the way, the next generation of Donovans who would grow up knowing the legacy their grandparents had created. "Do you have any regrets?" Sarah asked one evening, her head resting on Cole's shoulder in the way it had for over 30 years. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "Only one. I regret all the years before I found you, all that wasted time when I was lost and alone. But even that led me here, to you, so maybe it is not really a regret after all. What about you?" "No regrets," Sarah said firmly. "Not a single one. Every choice I made, every challenge I faced, brought me to you and to this life. I would not change anything." "Not even that terrifying day when Sinclair tried to force you to sign away the ranch?" Cole asked with a smile. "Especially not that day," Sarah replied. "Because that is the day you rode into my life with your crazy offer and your sad eyes and gave me back my future. That is the day I met the man I would spend my life loving. How could I possibly regret that?" Cole kissed her forehead, a gesture so familiar and comfortable after decades together that it required no thought. "I love you, Sarah Donovan. I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die, and beyond if such things are possible. I love you too, Cole Donovan. You saved my ranch, but more importantly, you saved me. You gave me love and family and a life richer than I ever imagined. You are the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you walked into that restaurant and offered to help a stranger. As the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, painting the Wyoming sky in colors too beautiful for words, Cole and Sarah sat surrounded by the life they had built together. The sounds of their grandchildren's laughter floated on the evening air, mingling with the low voices of their sons finishing the day's work. The ranch stretched around them, vast and prosperous, a testament to hard work, careful planning, and love that had endured every test. In the distance, cattle lowed contentedly, horses whinnied in their corrals, and the land itself seemed to breathe with peace and plenty. This was the Circle M, the legacy of George Mitchell passed through his daughter to her children and grandchildren, saved from destruction by a heartbroken cowboy with too much money and not enough purpose, and transformed through decades of partnership and love into something magnificent. Sarah and Cole had faced challenges that would have broken lesser people. Financial ruin, threats and sabotage, the normal trials of raising children and running a large operation, the inevitable conflicts that came with any long marriage. But they had faced them all together, never wavering in their commitment to each other or to the life they were building. They had created not just a successful ranch, but a real home, filled with love and laughter and the security of knowing they belonged to each other completely. As full darkness fell and stars began appearing in the vast Wyoming sky, their sons called goodnight and headed to their respective homes on the ranch property. The grandchildren were gathered up and taken inside for baths and bedtime stories. The ranch settled into its nightly quiet, that peaceful hour when the work was done and rest was earned. Cole stood and offered his hand to Sarah, pulling her to her feet with the same care he had shown since the day they met. "Come on, Mrs. Donovan, let us go inside. Tomorrow is another day, and we should rest while we can." "Another day of this beautiful life," Sarah agreed, taking his hand and letting him lead her inside their home, the house they had built together to hold their growing family. They climbed the stairs together, moving a bit slower than they once had, but still steady, still strong. In their bedroom, the room they had shared for over 30 years, they prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long habit. Cole helped Sarah with the buttons she could not reach, and she helped him with his boots, and they both laughed at how these simple tasks had become harder with age, but somehow more meaningful. Lying in bed, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been countless nights before, Sarah felt overwhelming gratitude for the path her life had taken. She could have lost everything that terrible summer when Sinclair had tried to steal her father's legacy. She could have been forced to sign away the ranch and leave Wyoming with nothing but bitter memories. Instead, a stranger with dark, sad eyes had walked into her life and changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Cole asked, his voice already heavy with approaching sleep. "For everything. For saving my ranch, for loving me, for giving me this life, for being exactly who you are." Cole's arms tightened around her. "I should be thanking you. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Sarah. Maybe more. You gave this broken-down cowboy a reason to live again." "Then we saved each other," Sarah said softly, "and built something beautiful together." "We did indeed," Cole agreed. "We surely did." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love and their life, surrounded by the fruits of decades of hard work and devotion. The Circle M Ranch slept peacefully around them, the cattle safe in their pastures, the horses quiet in their corrals, the land itself seeming to rest under the watchful stars. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the Wyoming hills, painting everything in shades of gold and promise, Cole and Sarah would rise together to face another day in the life they had built. Their sons would come for breakfast and advice, their grandchildren would run through the house bringing chaos and joy, and the ranch would continue its steady, productive rhythm. But tonight, they simply slept, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for their love and their land and won both, who had built a legacy that would endure for generations. The story that had begun with a desperate woman about to lose everything and a heartbroken cowboy looking for meaning had become an epic of partnership, perseverance, and enduring love. The Circle M Ranch stood as testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked together, when they loved fully and honestly, when they never gave up on each other or their dreams. It was more than land and cattle and buildings. It was home, it was family, it was the physical manifestation of a love story that had started with an impossible offer and had grown into something neither Sarah nor Cole could have imagined in those early days. As the Wyoming night deepened and stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the ranch slept in peace and plenty. And in the master bedroom of the main house, Sarah and Cole Donovan slept the sleep of the righteous, two souls who had found each other, saved each other, and loved each other through all the challenges life could throw at them, building not just a successful ranch, but a real and lasting home, filled with love that would echo through generations to come. Their story, which had started with a forced sale and a mysterious stranger, had become the foundation story of the Circle M Ranch, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that love could come from unexpected places, that generosity could change lives, that two people working together could overcome any obstacle. It was a story of the Old West, of hard work and determination, of standing up to bullies and fighting for what was right. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple. A story of two broken people who found each other and became whole. A story of a ranch saved and a love discovered. A story that ended not with a cliffhanger or uncertainty, but with peace, prosperity, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a love well earned. And that truly was the best ending of all.